FSU softball has a pretty tough regional this weekend, but one that is certainly manageable and one that they'll be expected to get out of. I've got Alex Powers, former FSU softball player and current ACC Network Analyst, and Gracen Shook, a good friend of mine who has spent a good amount of time around the Chattanooga softball program, both here to provide some insight on what to expect this weekend. Guys, thank you very much for joining me.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So we won't gloss over this. We'll talk about the regional in just a moment. But Alex, I want to start with you. You were there in Durham, did a great job for the ACC Network. We limped into the ACC tournament, it felt like, but then won a couple of games there, made the Duke game very, very competitive. We'll talk about kind of a nightmare inning for the Noles. But did you come out of the ACC tournament feeling a little bit more encouraged that they had at least put together a couple of good games and really a pretty good game minus an inning or so against Duke? Or did you feel about the same as you felt going into the ACC tournament, better or worse? Where do you kind of sit after the Noles leave Durham?
Yeah, I think that the common theme for Florida State this year has been their offense and how successful and how productive it's been output-wise. And so to know that that has been Florida State's identity all season long, that's, exactly what they stuck true to during the ACC Championship Tournament. So I love to see the bats continuing to come alive. I feel like they are peaking offensively at the right time. You had a lot of offensive production just from your total lineup too, not any players in particular. Like everybody was kind of firing on all cylinders. So that was super encouraging to see. But, Duke came out and was really good too. And Duke plays both sides of the field really well. They do defensive and they're pitching phenomenally. And then they've got some really good bats too. So Florida State did make a couple of defensive errors, which is what I feel like ultimately cost them the championship game. But I am encouraged looking ahead and going into the weekend. But at the end of the day, your body of work all season long can only speak for itself so much. You still have to continue to show up and just play the game. So.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I was encouraged, a little, let down that they couldn't finish it off, especially when you have the lead, right? When you have the lead and it's late, you're like, oh man, you're so close. Gracen, I know that you follow not only Florida State, but, Chattanooga pretty specifically too. On FSU, do you attribute the defensive miscues to just do you attribute it to anything specifically? Do you think that players might be pressing? Do you think that obviously there's a lot of youth in the infield? There's been some changes at different positions. What are your thoughts around just where Florida State's been defensively?
Yeah, I think a lot of it. I mean, some of it might be pressing, but I think you and I have had this conversation that there's times where it feels like you got to pick up either whether it's your pitcher or your fielder. It kind of works both ways, in the team aspect of everything. But just really, being there for your team and everything, and you have the inning with, the drop ball or misplay in left field, and then that turns into obviously the 4, 5, 6 run inning that it became. So. Just really making sure that you're trying to limit those. And, when your pitching's on, your defense kind of has to be there as well. And then when your defense is on, maybe your pitching's off, your defense is there to kind of, how many times have we seen in the past Josie Muffley come through in big situations and key moments and everything. And, that's kind of the same concept, your defense being there when maybe you're pitching struggle and help you get out of a jam and everything and just playing the next pitch in the next inning.
Gracen, I'll stick with you on this one. Chattanooga, Florida State's first matchup that'll happen tomorrow on Friday. Florida State would be expected to do well against any 4 seed that would come in, but you do have some familiarity here. What about Chattanooga should Florida State fans maybe be looking out for? Where are some potential pitfalls? Where are some things that the Noles will have to be kind of on their A game to overcome a 4 seed in a game that they should win and win probably going away?
Yeah, sure. Chattanooga's very deep in the pitching staff. I think it's 5 pitchers with 17 or more appearances on the year. And then Peja Gould, who's kind of came into the season as the number 2, maybe number 3 option for them, ends up winning SoCon Pitcher of the Year just for the way that she stepped up in the back half of the season to kind of carry the rotation. So very deep in the pitching staff, and then they've got the bats too to complement it. Kaylee Phillips and Kendall Forsyth are kind of the 1-2 punch offensively. In the power game, they also like to play a lot of small ball with the top part of the order. So I think what's really important is the defense just showing up for 7 innings. Not as many, I guess, mental lapses. Always knowing where the play is supposed to be made and everything. Just kind of being situationally aware throughout the game. Because Chattanooga, at any point they got some girls that can run well and that don't mind to lay one down every now and then. So I think really for the defense and the pitching, just being aware of every situation. And offensively, you're going to get a lot of options with Chattanooga thrown at you. I mean, I think Paige Gould, like I was talking about, she's going to kind of spearhead that this weekend. Good curveball, just try to get good bat on it, and obviously see what happens.
Alex, it's just human nature, and sometimes it creeps in. But as somebody who was at Florida State and had a ton of success and saw a ton of success, how hard is it when you go into this regional, and not just for Florida State? I mean, you see this like in every aspect of sports. How hard is it to not view your opponent on Friday as just another 4 seed, or take them lightly, or play down to competition, which again isn't necessarily a Florida State unique problem. That happens everywhere in all levels of sports. How hard is it to truly fight that as an athlete?
It's really hard. And I think the biggest thing, though, is you learn that very quickly, even through regular season, and how to kind of navigate that and those feelings when you have a schedule like you do in NCAA softball, other sports as well, like baseball, and those that are just a little bit more hefty, like with number of games. You're playing 50, 60 games in a year. It's really easy sometimes to just overlook that midweek game that you kind of are faced with and say, oh, okay, it's just so-and-so, right? But then you learn and get humbled very quickly, as is life. And sometimes you walk away on those games not having won or having been 0 for 4, right? Because your head's just not in it. Your tenacity and your aggressiveness and the competitive spirit that you have that ultimately got you to the level is just, it didn't show up because you looked past it and you let your opponent win it in that way. So I do feel like it's very common in sports to kind of have that approach. However, I do feel like we as athletes learn very quickly because we get humbled very quickly. And you look big picture for Florida State, for any team right now playing in a regional, in postseason, every single game matters, and every single opponent is standing in your way to ultimately get to where you want to be and achieve what it is that you want to accomplish. And so I do feel like kind of just that thought process and how we visualize what's ahead is really what keeps us in the present moment, to not have to and not be able to look past any opponent. Because again, on any given day, especially in postseason, it's called mayhem for a reason. Anybody can win. And so that going into this.
Yeah, and I don't know. My friends give me a hard time because I'm like the ultra, sunshine pumper, or everything's positive, or silver lining, or we'll lose a series to Syracuse and I'll be like, well, guys, at least. And so, but some of those challenges through the year, maybe they do kind of prepare you for this. Like, nobody would say like, well, I'm glad we lost to Syracuse because now we won't overlook this team, or, I'm glad we lost to Charlotte early in the year because now we won't, nobody's going to say that. But some of those earlier losses of, hey, remember this time where you did overlook this team, where you did kind of let this get past you. Maybe that does help. Maybe that is something that Coacha can kind of point to and say like, hey guys, we can beat anybody in this tournament. We can lose anybody in this tournament. So let's not do it. How much fun is it playing a regional at the Plex, packed out, everybody juiced, everybody ready to go because it's the postseason?
Home field advantage is a real thing. And it's just the ability to wake up in your own bed, probably have either, of course, your fans, right? But your families come and be in attendance too. And there's just such a good feeling walking in because there's so much familiarity going into that. You're in your own locker room. And again, just everything routine wise leading up to that point is so comfortable. And I think that's the best part of being able to host, because again, as a competitor, as an elite level athlete, you can go in anywhere and keep a similar routine, right? And that's all about yourself, not necessarily your environment, but it's just a different level of feeling good. And just kind of, when I say ease, I don't mean it's easy, but what I mean is like your heart, your mind, your feelings are at ease. So
yeah, Florida State was really good at home this year, especially in the back half of the season. Last week, I told you about my friends over at the Mango Board. What is the Mango Board? As a quick reminder, they are just trying to get the word out about the best fruit that you can buy at your local grocer. If you don't believe me, you should. My kids go absolutely crazy for mangoes, and we get them weekly. The Mango Board is also a proud supporter of FSU athletics. So here's what I want you guys to do. You don't have to click a link or enter a code or click a coupon or anything like that. The next time you're at your local Publix or local grocer, grab a couple of mangoes. Tag me on social media if you do. I can promise you this. You cannot be upset while enjoying a mango. It is physically impossible. I appreciate the Mango Board for their support of FSU athletics. I hope you remember to grab a couple the next time you do your grocery shopping. And if you go to an FSU event and you see the Mango Board out there, make sure that you tell them you saw this on Double Fries No Slaw. We talked a little bit about Chattanooga. I want to ask Alex about UCF and Auburn. Let's talk about their game one matchup. You know, I won't make a prediction if you want to, but who do you think has an advantage between those two? Who is Florida State maybe more likely to see on Saturday? I won't hold you to it if the other team wins because it is a pretty even matchup. But how do you see Friday between those two maybe going down?
Yeah, if you watched the ACC tournament and saw all my pregame predictions, I was very far off because we had a lot of upsets at the championship. But, you know, I actually was fortunate enough to cover UCF all season long for all their home games too. And they're a great squad. I think the thing that they have, the couple things actually that they have working best in their favor is it was their first year in the Big 12 conference. And the Big 12 is one of the best, if not the best right now, conference in college softball. So they are prepped and primed with having played phenomenal opponents all year. And then two, their pitcher, their ace right now, Sarah Willis, she is on a whole other level. I mean, she's just flat out nasty, and she's got that just internal competitive, like, you know, don't mess with me kind of attitude. And I feel like when you are facing an opponent that has that mindset, they can be really dangerous because they are confident. And then again, Auburn, talk about their conference too. Again, another team coming in, having played a lot of great competition all season long, having played in the SEC. So they're always dangerous because you never know. The thing too is they're being led in the circle as well by a pitcher that is just kind of like, you know, opening a lot of doors for them. And Maddie Pinta, she's had a great year and a lot of experience under her belt. But their offense is typically and historically what they've been known for. And their offensive numbers are down. They're hitting just shy of 250 as a team. And so if Florida State pitchers, if UCF pitchers, if Chattanooga pitchers can keep the Auburn offense at bay, I think that they're going to have a chance no matter who it is. And if I had to pick who Florida State, who Chattanooga, whoever's going to walk away with the win on that first day could see on Saturday night, I think it's going to be UCF because, again, they've impressed me all year long. So it's just a matter of putting it together. But, again, it's anybody's game at this point. So we'll see.
Yeah. If you find a way to win Saturday, so, you know, people that maybe are tuning in, the quick rundown of the regional is the winners from Friday play on Saturday. The losers from Friday play on Saturday. The loser of the two loser matchups is out on Saturday. The winner moves on to Sunday and only has to win one out of two games on Sunday. And so you are certainly set up well if you start 2-0. Gracen, is there either of the teams that we could potentially play if we win on Friday between UCF and Auburn? Is there one that maybe worries you a little bit more from a matchup standpoint?
I mean, UCF's obviously, I think what they have over Auburn in that matchup is the experience offensively. Like Alex said, Auburn's offensive numbers are down, but when you look at UCF, you have Shannon Doherty and Jazz Williams, you know, girls that have been around the block in college softball and kind of know what, you know what you're getting with them at this point. I think UCF could pose a good matchup, and obviously Sarah Willis is, like Alex said, having a great season. So, and she had some success in the last, you know, regional matchup against Florida State. But I think UCF obviously would be a tough matchup, and then Auburn as well with Maddie Pinta, you know, be a challenge in the circle. Though their offensive numbers are down, I think you know Florida State's pitching. You know, you kind of have to figure that out with that kind of solo matchup there against Auburn's offense. But you know, I would say UCF is probably the I don't want to say tougher matchup, but definitely poses a bigger threat to Florida State.
Alex, Coacha has a challenge, a problem to figure out. I don't know the best way to say that, but she certainly has a lot of different options in the circle that she can go to. I think some pitching has certainly improved. Others may be more questionable. How hard is her job this weekend to navigate who, when, and what pitchers she uses through hopefully just 3 games, but what could be a 3, 4, 5 game weekend.
It's going to be really tough. And I think that's one of the things that Lonnie does so well is just her strategizing going into games and looking at matchups, looking at numbers, and knowing what an opponent does well. Do they have a really good power game? If so, I'm probably not going to throw a pitcher that's going to leave the ball more middle or miss a little bit more up in the zone. And you could look at that 2 ways, right? So you have some pitchers that are more down ball pitchers and lower in the zone, but if they're not on their game that day, they're going to miss a little bit higher, more belt buckle, and a drop ball at your belt buckle is going to make for a long day if you are the defensive team. And so you start to look at that, and I think it's just going to be knowing what you're having and knowing what you're looking for, and maybe having a short leash, and even your other pitchers on staff that are going to be predominantly higher in the zone, and knowing, are they missing low and things, because again, if you have a rise ball kid and she's missing again belt buckle high, like, it's just going to make for long days. So I think the key of success for Florida State and for Coacha in particular is going to be knowing what it is that she's going up against and the opponent's strengths, and then trying to utilize Florida State's strengths going into that. And obviously it starts with this first game in Chattanooga and trying to minimize whatever it is that has been the way that your opponent is manufacturing runs, and trying to keep free passes, extra base hits, things like that to a minimum is going to be crucial. But I think the other side of that is going to be just really going into these games with a really short leash if you have to.
You could end up playing the same team 3 times in theory. But because this is so much different than a normal weekend series where you want to try and limit how many times a lineup sees somebody, because you could play, in theory, 3 different teams, Gracen, how much does that help? That you don't necessarily have to save somebody so that they're not seeing them all 3 days or however that kind of works out.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it does minimize the familiarity a team may have, and then obviously not playing. Obviously, UCF and FSU have history playing in the past, but they haven't seen a majority, really all of the Florida State staff at this point. So having not played these teams this season and not seeing this version of Florida State helps as well. So obviously, those teams are probably relying on their scouting and other different reports that they may get, but it does help not being as familiar with teams, and then obviously that gives you a chance to have even more success, not playing the same team over and over again as you would in a regular ACC series weekend or what have you.
Alex, I want to pivot that back to you real quick. Is there, in such a compressed regional that everything happens so quickly, is there even enough time to would you potentially hold somebody back from Friday so that your Saturday opponent couldn't scout them, or is there not even really enough time to do that in a regional setting?
Yeah, I wouldn't really hold anything back at this point. I think you just every game have to look at it and try to put your best people out there. And again, I think the strategy is going to be most important, because you look at the arms in the circle, for instance. I think that if you have somebody that's wheeling and dealing, like, you've got to keep them out there, right? Why change it up? Why give somebody a glimmer of hope to come in the game and do something different if you've got a pitcher that's just dealing? And it's going to be, though, trying to preserve the lifespan of everybody out there. And a lot of that starts obviously with the pitchers and how efficient they can be getting ahead in counts, limiting pitch count and things as a whole as well. And so you've got to put your best out there, but you don't want to let anybody else feel like they've got even the slightest chance. And so you don't have the time, I don't feel like, to really try to hold people back and say, no, you're going to go tomorrow, and you just got to go game by game. So
Grace, you want to make a prediction on this tournament? Who wins and how many games FSU playing if they're the ones to take it?
Sure. I like Florida State in this regional. I think we talked off air how the weaknesses that Florida State has can be masked by the weaknesses of some of the other teams, if that makes sense. So I think, it plays, obviously you're at home, like that's really important as well, in front of your fans, your crowd, get to sleep in your own bed. So that's important. I like Florida State. I think UCF poses a threat just with their experience on offense, and Sarah Willis. And then obviously Maddie Pinto with Auburn as well. And then Chattanooga, like I said, they're scrappy and can give you a game if you're not, up for it or focused for it. But I do like Florida State in this one.
Yeah, I like the Noles to win the regional. I could see Auburn. I could see UCF forcing a deciding game, like winning the first one and Florida State win the second one. We're almost at the year anniversary of that happening last year, and Cat Sandercock going for a perfect game. So, but I do think the Noles find a way to get out of the regional and win it. Alex, you wanna make it a clean sweep here?
Yeah, I'm going to pick the Noles too, but I definitely think that UCF is going to pose the biggest threat in this regional. I would foresee a UCF Florida State regional final game.
Should be a lot of fun. Postseason softball is a ton of fun. So yeah, can't wait for this weekend. Alex, what's your schedule this weekend? Where can people follow you? Where can they find where you'll be?
Yeah, I'll be in Bristol, Connecticut on ACC Network. So I will be recapping the day's events each day for all teams in the ACC that are competing in regionals, which is 5 of them. So if y'all are fans of the sport and want to know what's happening in the ACC, catch me on All ACC each night on the ACC Network.
Awesome. And then Gracen, you'll be in town. I've got a 2-year-old birthday party at home, so I'm not coming up. But Gracen will be in Tallahassee, so if you see him, go say hi for sure. But you guys have a great weekend. Thank you for hanging out, and go Noles.
Go Noles. Thanks.
Go Noles. Thank you.